I sat by my grandfather's hospital bed in the all-too-familiar room in Ohio. I am Andrew Wright, 34 years old, an ordinary accountant living and working here, in a place where everything seems to move at a slow, monotonous pace. But today, the atmosphere was entirely different. My grandfather, Anthony Wright, lay there, his deep eyes strangely calm and serene. He held my hand tightly, his thin fingers still carrying a faint warmth, as if trying to pass on his last remaining strength to me. He spoke softly, his voice weak but every word clear. "Andrew, live honorably. True to who you are, my boy. Don't let money or fame blind you. The most precious thing is still your character. And remember, you have always been my pride." His words echoed in my mind like a final admonition. I nodded, struggling to hold back the surge of emotion. Grandfather had always been like that. He never spoke empty words. From childhood, he had taught me simple values: honesty, patience, and love without expecting anything in return. I remembered those summer afternoons on the old farm, when he would take me for walks and tell me about the mistakes of his life, about how he had built his vast fortune from nothing with his own two hands. But today he was different. No long stories, just short, profound words. I could feel it. He was preparing to leave. Then he smiled, a very faint, very peaceful smile. His eyes closed, his breathing grew shallower. His hand gradually loosened in mine. I quickly gripped it tighter, my heart pounding wildly, softly calling his name, but only silence answered. His breathing stopped completely, the hand in mine grew cold. I froze as if the entire world had come to a halt. I called him louder, my voice breaking, but there was only the steady beeping of the machines. The pain of loss crashed over me like a violent wave, sweeping everything away. I collapsed onto the bed, tears flowing uncontrollably. This was the loneliest moment of my life. Grandfather, the closest person to me, the only one who truly understood and loved me unconditionally, was gone forever. I felt abandoned in a vast, inescapable void. After a few minutes, I forced myself to stand, quickly wiping away the tears. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and called each family member. First, my father, Hudson Wright. "Dad, grandfather, he's gone." My voice was strangely calm, but inside was emptiness. He was silent for a moment, then said curtly, "Yeah, I know. I'll make arrangements." No comfort, no questions. Next, my mother, Stella. She burst into tears over the phone, but I knew it was more habit than genuine grief. Then my older brother, Maverick, Uncle Thomas, the cousins. Each call passed like a cold reminder of the long-existing distance in this family. They only asked about times, locations, necessary arrangements. No one asked how I was feeling. My mind was still blank, unable to accept the reality that grandfather was gone, and that I was the only one by his side until the very end. The funeral took place a few days later, dignified and simple, exactly as he had wished. The grandchildren gathered in full at the small cemetery on the outskirts of Ohio. The atmosphere was heavy but mostly formal. White flower arrangements, neat black suits, but tears were rare and quickly dried. I stood quietly in a corner, real pain gnawing at my heart. I missed him terribly, his smile, his advice, even the times he got angry when I did something wrong. Around me, the family was dressed elegantly, but their eyes were full of calculation. I overheard whispers. "How much did he leave us? I heard it's a huge fortune. Who do you think gets the biggest share?" Probably Hudson. As if his death was merely a financial transfer, nothing more. I heard it all, but said nothing. For a long time, I had been used to being seen as insignificant. In the family, I was always the quiet youngest son, never competing or grabbing. My brother Maverick was different, sharp, boastful, always spoiled by our parents. Uncle Thomas and the cousins were the same. They lived for money and status. And me? I just wanted a normal life, to work hard and be there for grandfather when he needed me. Now he was gone, and the emptiness was even greater. After the funeral, everyone quickly returned to their daily lives. My parents went back to their home in Chicago. Maverick flew to New York for his business. Uncle Thomas and the cousins scattered. Only I lingered cleaning up grandfather's belongings at the old farm. I flipped through his old notebooks, faded family photos. Every item was a memory. The watch he always wore, the math book he used to teach me when I was little. I took them back to my small apartment, along with the emptiness and the feeling of being left behind. The family had dispersed as quickly as the wind, leaving me alone with the grief. 10 days later, I received an official letter from the lawyer. It arrived at my apartment with a formal seal. Dear Mr. Andrew Wright, please attend the law office in Chicago on the 15th of this month for the reading of the will of Mr. Anthony Wright. My heart beat faster. I knew he was wealthy, from real estate and investments, but he had always lived simply. I didn't expect much, but the letter made me curious. Would he have left anything to me, or just final words? I drove to Chicago filled with anxiety. The lawyer's office was in the city center, a luxurious high-rise building. When I entered the conference room, the entire family was already gathered. Hudson Wright, my father, sat at the head of the table, face stern. Stella Wright, my mother, sat beside him, eyes red, but I knew she was forcing it. Maverick sat next to Uncle Thomas, the cousins scattered around. I walked in and immediately faced looks of contempt mixed with pity, as if everyone had already guessed. Andrew wouldn't get anything. I greeted them quietly and took the last seat. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly lawyer with a stern face, began reading the will. When he announced that Hudson Wright and Thomas Wright would each receive $2 million, my father and uncle nodded, unable to hide their satisfaction. The room immediately filled with smugness, as if everything had gone exactly as they expected. Next, Mr. Maverick Wright and the other grandchildren each receive $1 million. Maverick grinned widely, slapping the cousins on the back. Whispers rose, full of excitement. My heart pounded, waiting for my turn. Would grandfather have remembered me? Or was I truly the extra one? For Mr. Andrew Wright, the lawyer continued, voice even and clear, according to the will, he inherits the sum of $10. The room fell silent for a moment. Then laughter erupted. I didn't need to look to know who started it. Maverick smirked first, turning toward me with undisguised mockery. One cousin sneered loudly enough for all to hear. That fits his place perfectly. Thomas shook his head, feigning a sigh, voice dripping with pity. Just $10? Grandfather was really straightforward. A few chuckles came from the other cousins. I saw Hudson, my father, lean back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes clearly satisfied, as if this result confirmed everything he'd ever thought about me. Stella glanced at me briefly, then turned away immediately, as if it had nothing to do with her. The whispers, the contemptuous and pitying looks mixed together. I sat there in the middle of the room, feeling like a living example of the failure they had always believed in. Lawyer Jenkins had to tap lightly on the table. His voice grew deeper and firmer. Please maintain order. He turned to the final page of the will and continued reading, each word slow and clear. Please note that, under a mandatory clause of the will, any individual who engages in litigation, complaints, or disputes regarding the distribution of the inherited assets will have their entire designated inheritance revoked. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The laughter stopped completely. I saw Maverick freeze, his smile stiffening on his lips. Thomas sat up straight, eyes flashing wariness. Hudson frowned, his crossed arms tightening slightly. Stella looked around, her face paling as she grasped the meaning of the clause. Lawyer Jenkins closed the file, voice still cold and decisive. This clause takes effect immediately upon the reading of the will. The room fell into heavy silence. No more laughter. No more mockery. And for the first time since the reading began, I realized that silence weighed far more than all the previous laughter. Hudson shook his head, feigning pity. This proves grandfather never valued you, Andrew. He didn't even leave you a small path. Maverick added, you cared for him all this time like a servant. In the end, it didn't change your place in the family. The cousins burst into loud laughter, joining in. I felt blood rush to my face, pain cutting like a knife. But I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. I silently took the $10 bill from the lawyer, stood up and left the room in silence. carrying the family's contemptuous looks and a pain no one understood. On the drive back to Ohio, I drove through the rain, tears mixing with the rain on the windshield. Grandfather left me $10? Grandfather, why would you do this? I knew he wasn't cruel, but why like this? The story was just beginning and I felt a storm approaching. The rain poured down relentlessly, the sound of it pounding on the car roof only adding to the chaos in my mind. I drove mechanically, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to stay calm and keep from veering off the road. The mocking words from the lawyer's office still echoed, Maverick's loud laughter, Father Hudson's pitying gaze, and the shaking heads from the cousins. They thought I was a failure, nothing more than a servant. But Grandfather, he was never like that. He was a deep thinker, always with a reason for everything he did. Why $10? It wasn't an insult, I was certain of that. But the pain still tore at me, making me feel like an outsider in my own flesh and blood family. When I got back to my small apartment on the outskirts of Ohio, I pushed the door open and stepped in, soaked to the bone. The room was pitch dark, lit only by the streetlight filtering through the window. I collapsed onto the sofa without bothering to turn on the light, letting the darkness envelop me. The emptiness and exhaustion, both physical and mental, left me unwilling to do anything. The will reading replayed in my head like an unhealed scratch, cutting deeper and deeper, hurting endlessly. I pulled the $10 bill from my pocket, crumpling it, then smoothing it out again, as if that could erase the harsh reality. But no, it was still there, a worn, lifeless piece of paper currency. I knew Anthony, my grandfather, had never been shallow or impulsive. He was a seasoned businessman who built a financial empire from the 1960s onward. Yet he always lived simply, teaching us that money was merely a tool, not the goal. He wasn't the type to use money to insult others. That thought made it impossible for me to see the $10 as mere mockery. Perhaps it was a message, a test. I laughed at myself. It sounded like something from a movie. But Grandfather had once said, "Never underestimate small things, Andrew. They often hold great secrets." I carefully took out the bill and placed it under the table lamp, the only dim yellow light in the room. As an accountant, I was used to examining details closely, from figures on balance sheets to tiny clauses in contracts. I turned the bill over and over, checking every edge. At first, nothing seemed unusual. But then, under the light, I noticed a few numbers in the serial sequence had been subtly marked in red ink. Very faint and precise, almost invisible to the naked eye unless you looked closely. My heart beat faster. Those numbers 4729, they stood out strangely, as if deliberately highlighted. Who did that? Grandfather? Or just coincidence? Memories suddenly returned, clear as yesterday. Grandfather had often said numbers have their own logic, and with enough patience they would tell their story. When I was little, he loved playing games with me, arranging numbers to decode, calculating to find patterns. "Numbers never lie, Andrew," he'd say. "They're more honest than people." Now, looking at the red-marked digits, a chill ran down my spine. This wasn't random. Grandfather was trying to tell me something, only me. I didn't fully understand his intent, but after trying to arrange and compare the marked numbers, I realized they weren't random. They formed a sequence, something like 4729-1856, like a code. Given it involved money and numbering systems, only one place came to mind that could explain it: the bank. The old bank where Grandfather had done business for years, First National Bank in downtown Ohio. He often talked about it, the place where he kept his assets and secrets. Could this $10 bill be the key? The thought made me excited, like stepping into an unexpected adventure. That night I barely slept. The numbers danced in my head, mixed with images of Grandfather smiling before he passed. The next morning I got up early, put on my cleanest clothes, and took the $10 bill along with my ID. On the way to the bank I was cautious but certain. The rain had stopped. The sky was clear, like a good omen. I wondered, am I imagining this? Or is this truly the legacy he left me? The bank doors opened, the familiar smell of paper and money rushed in. I took a deep breath and approached the counter. "Hello, I need to speak to the manager about a personal matter," I said to the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked at me suspiciously, but when I mentioned grandfather's name, Anthony Wright, her expression changed. "Mr. Wright, let me check. Please follow me." She led me to a private room where a middle-aged man, Mr. Smith, the manager, was waiting. I presented my ID and showed the $10 bill, explaining it was the only thing Anthony had left me after his death, and that it had unusual markings. "I think this might be a code," I explained, pointing to the red numbers. Mr. Smith took the bill and examined it closely under a magnifying glass. "Let me see. This $10 bill is quite interesting." He accessed the private archived records that Anthony Wright had sealed long ago. The computer beeped, and his face grew serious. "Mr. Wright left separate instructions," he said, voice lowering, "requiring the bank to proceed only when someone presents the correct evidence along with the verification sequence." My heart pounded wildly. This was real. After verification, the bank confirmed the red marked numbers on the $10 bill were the exact code. Grandfather had registered to access his personal safe deposit box, completely separate from the will, so no family member had any right to interfere or access it. "This is private property intended only for the holder of the code," Mr. Smith emphasized. I felt breathless with excitement. The mandatory identity verification took time. Fingerprint checks, signatures, even secret questions grandfather had set up. The standard waiting period was 24 hours, but Mr. Smith expedited it due to the clear records. "Mr. Wright prepared thoroughly," he said. Finally, a bank employee led me down to the private storage area, a cool basement filled with sturdy safes. Grandfather's box, number 4729, matching the code, opened with a creak. Before my eyes were 30 sealed gold bars gleaming under the light. Beside them were portfolios of blue-chip stocks from companies like Apple and Microsoft, government bonds, and other financial documents. The estimated total value was around $25 million. Mr. Smith whispered the figure, nearly making me stagger. I stood silent for a long time, not overwhelmed by the enormous sum, but because, for the first time, I fully understood the quiet preparation and absolute trust grandfather had placed in me. He had truly seen me. Amid a calculating family, the heavy gold bars, the fragile stock certificates, all proof of the love he reserved solely for me. Tears streamed down my face, but this time they were tears of happiness mixed with sorrow. "Grandfather, now I understand." Inside the box was also a handwritten letter from him, sealed separately in an envelope, as if waiting for the right person to open and read it. I held it with trembling hands, not daring to open it yet. After completing the necessary legal procedures, signing receipts, confirming ownership, I left the bank with the letter in hand, in an unusually calm state. The pain was still there, but this time I clearly felt I was no longer as alone as before. Grandfather was still with me, through the numbers, through this legacy. On the way home, I wondered, what will the letter reveal? And the family? If they find out, the real storm will come. I drove slowly through the familiar streets of Ohio, the cool breeze slipping through the slightly open window, carrying the scent of damp earth after the rain. My small apartment appeared at the end of the road, a modest place in a quiet residential neighborhood. I parked, turned off the engine, and sat still for a long while, my hand still tightly clutching the letter in my jacket pocket. It felt heavy. Not because of the thin paper, but because of what it held inside. Grandfather had prepared everything so meticulously, this letter was certainly no empty words. I took a deep breath, entered the house, turned on the kitchen light, and sat down at the dining table, the spot where I often sat alone on late nights. I sat in silence for a very long time before opening grandfather's handwritten letter. My hands trembled as if afraid that opening it would dissipate the last trace of his warmth. The envelope was old and worn, the handwriting familiar, the curving strokes I'd seen him use in his business notebooks. I gently tore it open and pulled out the neatly folded sheet. The words appeared, beginning with an affectionate greeting. My dear Andrew, my beloved grandson, I have always seen in you kindness, patience, and respect that no money can buy. You were the light in my final days, and I write these lines so you know I have never stopped being proud of you. My heart tightened. His words were warm like a hug from the past. I continued reading, whispering them in my mind, trying not to let tears blur the letters. In the letter, Anthony admitted that toward the end of his life, he had seen clearly how his two sons, my father Hudson and Uncle Thomas, along with most of the grandchildren, only approached him for money. They visited me, but their eyes always scanned the surroundings, calculating how much I had left. Their concern always came with schemes and material expectations, he wrote. I could picture him writing these lines in the hospital room with a sad smile on his lips. He wasn't angry, just objective, like a businessman analyzing the market. Anthony wrote that to them. He was no longer a loved one, but gradually became a source of assets to exploit, a guarantee for their future comfortable lives. I saw them smile and talk, but behind it were phone calls asking about real estate, about stocks. They didn't ask if I was in pain or tired. They only asked how much longer I would live. His words were sharp, but not bitter. It reminded me of family gatherings when everyone crowded around him, but conversations always revolved around money. I had once thought it normal, but now, through his lens, everything was clearer than ever. In contrast, Anthony emphasized that I was the only one who stayed by his side without ulterior motives. You were the one who remained when everyone's eyes were on the money. You called just to check on me. You visited without demanding anything. You cared for me in my illness, not for a reward, but out of true love. That made me trust you more than anyone else in the family. Reading this, I had to pause and breathe deeply. Grandfather had seen everything. The nights I stayed awake by his bedside, changing his damp cloths, listening to his old stories. Meanwhile, my parents and Maverick only dropped by briefly before excusing themselves with busyness. He trusted me, and that healed part of the wound from the will reading. Then he explained that leaving me $10 in the will was not disdain but a deliberate test. I left you $10 so you could see the true faces of the family for yourself. You would see them mock and despise you, and through that understand who is with you for real kinship and who stays only for money. That is the lesson I wanted you to learn, Andrew. Don't let them exploit you as they tried to do with me. I was stunned. So it was all planned? The $10 wasn't a joke, but a key to revealing the truth. He had predicted it all. The laughter in the lawyer's office. Maverick's sarcasm. He wanted me to see clearly so I wouldn't be deceived anymore. Excitement surged. Grandfather was that clever. What else was in his plan? At the end of the letter, he expressed hope that I would continue living simply and holding firm to my principles. Use what I left you to protect yourself and choose your own life instead of trying to please anyone. You deserve true happiness, Andrew. I love you. It ended with his shaky but loving signature. I choked up. Tears fell drop by drop onto the letter. The pent-up emotions finally burst in the quiet room. I cried like a child, shoulders shaking, sobs catching in my throat. Not from sadness, but from being moved, from gratitude. Grandfather had thought of me that deeply, while all my life I had only given without expecting anything in return. In the wave of emotion, childhood memories flooded back like an old film reel. I remembered being compared and belittled right in my own family. From a young age, I was the quiet, awkward child, never as quick-witted as Maverick. My parents proudly said he was smart and would surely achieve great things. As for me, I was mentioned casually. Andrew's fine, but don't expect too much. At family gatherings, I stood silently on the sidelines, listening to them laugh and talk, feeling like an extra. Only Grandfather noticed, pulling me close. Sit here with me, tell me what you learned at school today. He listened, shielding me from harsh words. Don't mind them, Andrew. You have your own value. I remembered afternoons when he took me walking around the farm. He held my hand, slowly pointing to the lush rows of trees and saying life was like them. To grow strong, you need patience. I remembered him sitting beside me at the old wooden table, opening his worn notebook, holding a pencil and patiently teaching me to think with numbers. He said 2 + 3 is always 5, but rearranged, numbers can tell a different story. The logic and honesty in those numbers would teach people how to live upright. With him, I felt a rare safety, being heard, understood without judgment or demands. In a competitive, comparative family, he was my only support. Growing up, even as work consumed me, long days in the accounting office with piles of books and figures, I still regularly called to check on him. "How have you been lately, grandfather? I'll visit this weekend." I visited, bringing small gifts for holidays. A box of his favorite cookies, an old math book. Not to curry favor, but because I genuinely cared. When he fell ill, late-stage cancer, I stayed by his side day and night, wiping him down, feeding him, listening to his past stories. The rest of the family visited occasionally, but I was there until the final moment, holding his hand as his breathing faded. Now I realized I had never asked for or demanded anything. Everything I gave came from true kinship, and that was what he saw most clearly. Back to reality, I wiped my tears and carefully folded the letter. I understood that the fortune grandfather left, $25 million, wasn't just wealth, but the thing most likely to attract greed and exploitation. If I did nothing, it would become fuel for ambition, disputes, and new hurts that grandfather had tried to prevent from the start. He had built a barrier. I imagined them finding out. Maverick's greedy eyes, Father Hudson's persuasion. The storm was coming, and I had to prepare. The next day, I proactively hired a lawyer. I called a reputable firm in Chicago where grandfather had done business. "I need to set up asset protection," I told Lawyer Jenkins, the one who read the will. He was surprised, but when I explained the safe deposit box, he nodded. "Mr. Anthony foresaw everything. We'll establish a trust anonymously so no one can access it." We met all morning reviewing documents, planning to keep everything confidential. I continued living simply and quietly, still working as an accountant, still in my small apartment, no outward changes. But inside, I was building a protective wall, preparing for the waves I knew would soon crash in. The days that followed passed in a false sense of peace. I still woke up early every morning, brewed bitter black coffee, and drove to the office with my familiar stack of ledgers. My colleagues knew nothing about the enormous fortune quietly sitting in my anonymous accounts. I still wore my old worn-out clothes, ate lunch at the diner near the company, and came home in the evenings to a book or a simple TV program. But every night I checked emails from Lawyer Jenkins, making sure everything was locked down tight. Grandfather had taught me patience, and now I was waiting for the storm he had predicted. I knew the family wouldn't let it go. They were always like that, greedy, never missing an opportunity. A month passed quickly. It was a Saturday afternoon when I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing monthly bills, an old habit to keep my mind sharp. A sudden forceful knocking sounded at the door. I frowned and glanced at the clock, 4 p.m. Who would show up unannounced? I stood, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. There they were, Father Hudson, Mother Stella, and Brother Maverick. They stood there, faces tense, not a single smile, just from their eyes and posture. Father scowling, Mother anxious, Maverick impatient. I knew this wasn't a visit out of concern. My heart beat faster. Had the secret been exposed? I took a deep breath and opened the door. Without waiting for a greeting, he strode straight into the apartment without asking, his gaze scanning my modest little home as if searching for signs of wealth. Mother Stella followed, clutching her purse tighter than usual, and Maverick slammed the door shut, leaning against the wall with a half-smirk. Before I could say anything, Father turned sharply, voice harsh. "We need to talk. The family knows about the huge fortune grandfather left solely to you." I froze for a few seconds upon hearing them mention the amount. The secret was out. A flurry of questions flashed through my mind. How did they find out? I had kept it completely confidential. The lawyer had promised absolute discretion. Was it a leak from the bank or someone at the law firm? But in the end, it didn't matter anymore. I didn't deny it. No need. My silence was enough for them to understand. My father, Hudson, nodded slowly, eyes as if he already held the winning hand. He spoke directly without beating around the bush. Don't hide it from us. I heard from a friend at the bank. Grandfather left you over $25 million, right? Why keep it so secret? This is a family matter, not just yours. I pulled out chairs, inviting them to sit, trying to keep my voice calm despite my pounding heart. Please sit, Mom, Dad, Maverick. I'm not hiding anything. It was simply Grandfather's wish. I'm following exactly what he left. But my father didn't sit. He paced back and forth in my cramped living room, impatience clear on his face. You should know better, Andrew. Share that fortune equally with the family to keep the peace. We're blood. We can't let you hoard it all. My mother, Stella, immediately chimed in. Her voice trembled, a mix of pleading and reproach. That's right, son. Blood ties demand it. I gave birth to you, raised you. Now that you have means, you must think of the family. You don't want to see your parents and siblings in hardship, do you? Maverick was less roundabout than our parents. He stepped closer, slapping my shoulder hard in a fake brotherly gesture, as if we were still close. Listen, little brother. I need a share for business. I have a big project, real estate, very profitable. If it succeeds, the whole family benefits. Give me a few million. Consider it an investment. You're not going to use all that money anyway. I listened to it all, heart pounding with tension. Not a single word came from genuine care for me. They hadn't come to check on me. They came for the money, exactly as Grandfather had seen through. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm but firm. I'm sorry, but no. This was property Grandfather prepared separately for me, completely apart from the will. I have no obligation to share, and I will respect his wishes. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. My father's face flushed red, his voice rising in anger. How dare you say that? Enough with the selfishness. You manipulated Grandfather when he was old and weak, sweet-talking him into leaving everything to you. You're betraying the family. He pointed directly at my face, shouting uncontrollably. My mother burst into tears. Andrew, how did you turn out like this? I'm so disappointed in you. We're family. You can't turn your back on your parents like that. Maverick cut in, voice harsh and venomous. Who do you think you are? Grandfather only left it to you because you pretended to care. Now your true colors are showing. Share it, or consider our brotherhood over. I didn't respond. Didn't argue. Painful old memories flooded back, but I held on to my final calm. I stood, voice low and resolute. I think that's enough for today. Please leave. We shouldn't continue talking while everyone is angry. They left in a rage, the door closing with a dry thud. I sank into the chair, hands still shaking. One question repeated in my mind. How did they find out? And above all, I knew clearly they wouldn't stop. That night, I barely slept. Old memories swirled deeply in my head, especially the time Grandfather had spoken about father, voice low and slow. Your father is ambitious but lacks patience. Don't let him pull you down his path. Now those words were clearer than ever. The next morning, I called Lawyer Jenkins immediately, recounting the entire incident. He listened, then said briefly and confidently, They'll be back. But don't worry, we're prepared. A few days later, they returned, this time in greater numbers. The knocking sounded in the evening as I was eating dinner alone. Opening the door, I saw the whole extended family. Parents, Maverick, Thomas, and several cousins. They crowded into my small apartment, turning my peaceful space into a tense battleground. Thomas broke the silence first, stepping forward, voice booming as if to overwhelm everyone. Andrew, we need to make this clear. You can't keep all of Grandfather's money like that. This isn't just your affair. My mother, Stella, plopped onto the sofa, sobbing loudly, voice mixed with hiccups. Son, think of the effort to raise you. I brought you up through all those years of hardship. Have you forgotten? Now the family is in this situation, you can't turn away. Maverick jumped in right after, voice half coercive, half fake friendly. Listen to me, Andrew. Share it fairly. Everyone gets a portion. You're not going to use all that money. I just need a share for business, proper investment. If it succeeds, the whole family benefits. I looked at each familiar face, then spoke slowly, voice not loud but enough to cut through the accusations. What about during the will reading? The room paused for a beat. I continued, each word falling clearly. When everyone heard grandfather left me only $10, did anyone step up to comfort me? Did anyone offer to share their own inheritance with me? Or did everyone just take turns laughing, mocking, treating me like I didn't matter? No one answered. A few eyes looked down, some turned away. I went on, voice lowering but unable to hide the bitterness. Back then, no one mentioned family ethics or fairness. Only when you learned I had money did everyone remember I'm still part of the family. Each began their own argument, from family morality to fair sharing. One cousin spoke up indignantly. Grandfather belonged to all of us, so his assets should be shared too. Uncle Thomas immediately joined in, voice sharp and unmasked. Enough selfishness, Andrew. The family needs money to get by, to invest. You can't stand outside like this. I stood in the middle of the room listening to it all in silence. My heart pounded under the pressure from the surrounding eyes and voices. The accusations overlapped, each sentence like a verdict, making the air stifling, like a trial without a judge. When things momentarily quieted, I spoke, voice calm but resolute. I respect everyone, but grandfather's decision deserves the same respect. This was his private wish, not something to divide or negotiate. In frustration, Uncle Thomas slammed his hand on the table, voice rising. If you refuse, I'll sue you. I'll demand fair inheritance rights for everyone. The room fell silent for a second. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. I smiled faintly, voice still even and cool. Go ahead and sue if you think that's the right way. I won't stop you, and I'm not afraid of it. I paused, then continued. But grandfather included a clause prohibiting lawsuits or disputes over the will. Anyone who violates it loses their entire designated share. Your $2 million, Uncle. Maverick's $1 million, everything. Shock was clear on every face. My father, Hudson, went pale, voice trembling with rage. How dare you talk to me like that? What do you think you're doing, Andrew? Maverick muttered, trying to sound tough but unable to hide his unease. That's just a bluff, right? A scare tactic to shut us up. There's no such clause. But deep down they knew I was telling the truth. The clause had been announced clearly. It couldn't be denied. Realizing they couldn't sway me and didn't dare risk losing what they already had, the group stood and left in anger, helplessness, and resentment. Uncle Thomas glared at me one last time. You'll regret this, Andrew. My mother sobbed. How did my son turn out like this? The door closed behind them, leaving the room in disarray and me alone, exhausted, knowing that from that moment every bridge between me and my old family had truly collapsed. I understood they wouldn't give up easily. They would try other ways, perhaps persuasion, perhaps threats. I intensified work with the lawyer, reviewing all legal documents, the trust, anonymous accounts, protective clauses. Jenkins said, we'll add another layer of security. They won't touch it. I prepared for late-night calls, rumors. The real storm was coming. In the days following that confrontation, I lived in a state of constant alertness. Every doorbell ring or unknown call made my heart beat faster. I imagined Maverick calling in the middle of the night, his voice slurred with alcohol as he persuaded, "Think it over, little brother, we're all family." Or Father Hudson sending a letter full of moral reproach. But strangely, nothing happened. Silence enveloped everything like the calm before a storm. I continued my accounting work, but my mind was always distracted. Grandfather had once said, "Silence is sometimes more dangerous than noise." And he was right. They no longer bothered me, but that silence cut deeper gradually. Time passed, and I decided to allocate a modest portion of the fortune to buy a smaller, well-equipped apartment. Nothing ostentatious. No luxurious villa or expensive car. I didn't want that. I found a house on the outskirts of Ohio with a small backyard garden and windows overlooking the woods. This might be a peaceful place, I told myself as I signed the contract. A private space, removed from prying eyes and unnecessary troubles. I moved in quietly without telling anyone. The first night I lay on the new bed listening to the wind rustling through the leaves, feeling as if grandfather was somewhere, smiling approvingly. My life became more stable materially. Everything was neat and quiet, suiting my personality. An accountant who liked precision and order. I bought essentials. A simple wooden table and chairs, a few novels for evening reading, and a better coffee maker. Money was no longer a burden. I could pay bills without worry, even investing part of it in safe funds. But that quietness also brought an indescribable void. At first I thought it was just habit from the old life, the cramped apartment, long nights alone. But gradually I realized it was loneliness. No family laughter, no calls checking in, even if fake. Just me with numbers on the screen and memories of grandfather. The family stopped bothering me from then on, and I actively avoided contact. On the surface, it was peace, no arguments, no pressure. But inside was the feeling of being severed from familiar roots. I had once thought family was the final refuge no matter what. Now I was like a branch cut off, drifting alone. On weekend evenings, I sat by the window watching the empty street, wondering, am I truly free or just isolated? Anxious, waiting for a call, yet fearful if it came. A wealthy life, but why so empty? In a rare moment of calling, perhaps sudden nostalgia, I dialed Father Hudson's number. It was his birthday, a date I still remembered from the old calendar. The phone rang a few times, then his voice came ice cold. Why are you calling me? I hesitated. Hello, Dad. It's your birthday. I'm calling to wish... But he cut me off, voice harsh. Wish what? How dare you still call? I've disowned you. You chose money over family. Don't call again. The call ended coldly, leaving no room for explanation. I held the phone, stunned as if slapped hard. Grandfather, how did things turn out like this? Tears streamed down, not from anger, but from pain. The pain of what was lost. Right after I realized I'd been removed from the family group chat. I opened the app and searched for Wright Family, once full of reunion photos and holiday greetings, but it was gone, as if my existence had been erased with a simple action. I checked Maverick's friends list. I was blocked. That feeling was like a punch to the chest. I was no longer part of them. They had deleted me from their lives as easily as an old message. I sat there staring at the dark screen, heart full of emptiness. The initial anxiety turned into deep sadness. Holidays, birthdays, or important family events passed without my knowledge. Thanksgiving, I sat alone with a store-bought turkey dinner, wondering what they were doing. Maverick's birthday came. I remembered the date but didn't call. Only by chance, scrolling social media, a rare habit, did I see photos and videos they posted. Parents smiling at the dinner table, Uncle Thomas raising a glass, cousins taking selfies. I wasn't in any of them. I realized I was completely outside, like a stranger peering through a window. Each time my heart ached. They're happy without me. Was I really that superfluous? Once at Christmas, the longing was too strong, so I drove to my parents' house in Chicago, bringing a small gift, the old watch from grandfather, hoping it would bridge the gap. Light snow fell. The festive atmosphere was everywhere, but my heart pounded like entering a tiger's den. I knocked. Mother Stella opened the door, her face changing. "What are you doing here?" Father Hudson shouted from inside. "Get out! You're no son of mine." Maverick pushed forward, smirking. Got rich and suddenly remember family. Too late. Harsh insults poured out like knife cuts. I stood there, snow falling on my shoulders, trying to explain. I just wanted to wish you Merry Christmas. but they shook their heads coldly and slammed the door. I left quietly, driving home in the dark, realizing that door had been shut tight long ago. Tears blurred the highway. I wondered, why do I still hope? Each time like that, I didn't feel anger, just a quiet void spreading in my heart, the sad feeling of realizing I had always been the extra one in my own flesh and blood family. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, letting memories slowly return. I remembered family dinners where I always sat at the end of the table, silently listening to them talk. Never asked for my opinion, no one waiting for me to speak. Only grandfather noticed, pulling me close. "Sit here with me, tell me what you learned at school today." He listened, shielding me from harsh words. "Don't mind them, Andrew. You have your own value." Now that he was gone, I felt like just a shadow, lost in a place that should have been mine. Material life was fuller than before, but that wealth couldn't fill the heartbreaking loneliness. I gradually avoided social media, avoiding any images or reminders of the old family, but the sadness still crept in, quietly clinging to me, especially on sleepless nights. The peak came on my wedding day. I met Sarah, a colleague in the accounting office, through late work sessions. She was gentle and understanding, with a warm smile that helped me forget the pain. We fell in love quietly and decided to marry after a year of dating. The wedding was small, only friends and Sarah's relatives. I sent invitations to my family, hoping for a miracle. But no one from my side showed up. One side of the church was empty. Sarah's relatives whispered, "Where's the groom's family?" I stood there in my suit, unable to hide the embarrassment and awkwardness. My face burned. I tried to smile, but my heart ached sharply. In the moment, the pastor asked, "Does anyone object to this marriage?" The room remained silent as per tradition. But to me, that silence meant something else. It wasn't consent. It was the void left by those who should have been there. I felt the absence painfully, as if my past was stripped bare before strangers sitting below. Parents didn't come. No message from Maverick. Uncle Thomas and the cousins completely vanished, as if they had never existed in my life. I looked at Sarah. Her eyes showed a bit of worry, a bit of pity, but still enough gentleness to give me strength. In that moment, I understood that even if the whole world turned away, I wasn't standing there alone. But fortunately, my wife, Sarah Wright, was a gentle and understanding woman. She didn't ask much, just quietly held my hand under the reception table, whispering, "From now on, you have me. We'll be okay." Her words were like medicine, easing the humiliation and loss. We danced under the dim lights, and for the first time, I felt I belonged somewhere. Still, sometimes when alone, when Sarah was asleep or I worked late, I couldn't avoid the pang when thinking of the old family. Things that could have been different if money hadn't interfered. I imagined another world, them at the wedding smiling, hugging me, but reality was harsh. I remembered grandfather, "You must choose your own life." And I was doing that. In the end, I gradually realized that some relationships cannot be saved by one-sided sacrifice. From then on, I set the past aside, focusing on building and protecting my small family. Sarah and I bought a slightly larger house, preparing for the future. I invested time in work, books, and her, the only place I truly belonged. The wealthy but lonely life gradually gave way to true peace. 2 years passed like a peaceful dream, without storms. That was the time I learned to live without looking back, without letting old ghosts haunt me. Sarah and I had settled into our new home, a cozy wooden house on the outskirts of Ohio, with a backyard large enough for a few flower beds and a small outdoor table and chairs. We didn't splurge. Everything remained simple, but now there was space for future plans. I still worked as an accountant, still sat with piles of ledgers and numbers every day, but now the job was no longer a burden. It was a joy, a way to keep my mind sharp, as grandfather had taught me. Sarah worked part-time at the nearby library, and in the evenings we cooked together, read books, or simply sat side by side listening to the wind rustling through the leaves. Life was so peaceful that sometimes I wondered, is this reality? or just the calm before the storm. Then that day came, the day Sarah gave birth to our son. It was a spring morning when cherry blossoms were starting to bloom outside the hospital window. Sarah gripped my hand tightly in the delivery room, her face pale from pain but her smile still resilient. When the cry rang out, the world around us seemed to stop. The tiny boy with pink skin and closed eyes, we named him Lucian, meaning light, because he was the ray of light guiding us through the dark years. The day we welcomed him was quiet, just the three of us in the hospital room with the doctor and nurses smiling congratulations. No one from the old family showed up. No calls, no messages, no flowers. I had sent announcements, an old habit hard to break, but expected nothing. And indeed, they didn't come. But this time, I no longer waited or felt disappointed. All my attention and love were devoted entirely to the little angel in my arms and the woman who had walked with me through the hardest days. I held Lucian gently, feeling the fragile warmth from his tiny body, then looked at Sarah, her tired but gentle smile still lingering on her face. In that moment, I knew I had chosen correctly. The old family was just the past. Here, Sarah and Lucian, was the present and future I wanted to protect. On the drive home with the baby, I drove slower than usual, occasionally glancing at Lucian sleeping peacefully in the car seat, my heart filled with a mix of excitement and determination. I promised myself I would be a strong enough father so my son would never endure the hurts I had experienced. The old storm seemed to have receded far behind, but deep down, I knew life would never be completely calm. And this time, I was ready to face it, no longer alone as before. My life gradually settled into a peaceful rhythm. Every morning I woke early, brewed coffee for Sarah, then hugged Lucian before leaving for work on time. The accounting office was still the same, piles of papers, logical numbers. But now I came home earlier, eager for evenings gathered with wife and son. We ate simple but fulfilling meals. Homemade pasta, fresh salad from the backyard garden, and Lucian's laughter as he played with toys. Those moments made me clearly feel the value of stability. Not money, but peace from small things. I invested part of the inheritance in an education fund for Lucian, in safe stocks, but still maintained a modest lifestyle. Grandfather would be proud, I thought. The initial anxiety about the future had given way to simple joy. I have everything. I almost stopped thinking about the old family, trying to set aside unhappy memories to focus on the present. I deleted their numbers from my contacts, avoided social media to not accidentally see their photos. But still, news about them occasionally arrived unexpectedly without me seeking it. Once I called a distant relative, an aunt in the countryside, just to check on her health because I suddenly remembered her. She told me in detail, voice full of regret, that my family over there was in chaos. Ever since receiving the inheritance, everything had changed completely. My heart beat faster, not from curiosity but because a familiar anxiety stirred again. I wondered how they were and whether those upheavals would still affect the peaceful life I was trying to maintain. From the aunt's stories and old neighbors whenever I happened to contact them, like the neighbor who lived next to my parents in Chicago, I learned that since receiving the inheritance money, my family had plunged into risky investments. They believed in get-rich-quick schemes, buying and selling based on rumors and unfounded promises. Maverick led the way, boasting about a prime real estate project in Florida, convincing Father Hudson and Uncle Thomas to pour in money. They thought the money would double, the neighbor said over the phone, voice bitter. But I see they were blinded. I listened without commenting but felt anxious. They'll collapse and then they'll come back to me? The money was spent uncontrollably. Homes renovated luxuriously. Parents installed imported granite kitchens. Uncle Thomas added a pool. Cars replaced constantly, from Mercedes to BMW, extravagant trips to Europe, Hawaii, and endless parties with expensive wine, as if the money was endless. My aunt said, "They post photos on Facebook all the time. Do you know? Maverick's birthday party was extravagant, inviting hundreds." I pictured it, them grinning, toasting, while grandfather shook his head from eternity. I wasn't jealous, just amused. Haven't they learned anything from grandfather? But deep down, I knew the end was near, and it made me anxiously wait, not for schadenfreude, but to confirm what grandfather had taught. Just a few years later, the investments failed one after another. The get-rich-quick projects collapsed. Florida real estate turned out to be a bubble. Rumor-based stocks plummeted. This dragged in mounting debts, large and small, with no one clearly responsible. An old neighbor recounted over the phone, voice mixed with exasperation. "Your father had to borrow from the bank to pay Maverick's debts. Now they argue all day in the house." I sat silently, phone to my ear, tension rising, not from surprise, but because everything was unfolding exactly as I had thought. That family was cracking from within piece by piece. Their once confident, proud demeanor gradually vanished, replaced by visible fatigue on their faces, unfounded irritability, and endless arguments without resolution. No one stayed calm. No one yielded. One afternoon, my aunt called, voice lowered as if afraid of being overheard. "Your mother called me crying non-stop. In their house, they blame each other constantly. No peaceful day left." Hearing that, I just stayed silent. No gloating, no joy. I only realized that when money ran low, what they had long hidden finally revealed itself clearer than ever. From the neighbor near my parents' house, I gradually pictured what was happening there. He said arguments were so frequent the whole neighborhood heard. Maverick was the loudest. The neighbor recounted that he constantly blamed Father Hudson for being too conservative, not daring big investments, thus missing life-changing opportunities. Father shouted back, full of rage, saying Maverick had painted unrealistic get-rich fantasies to lure him into pouring everything in, then let it all collapse. Uncle Thomas didn't stay out of it. According to accounts, he claimed he only followed the cousin's advice, that without being egged on, he wouldn't have stumbled. No one took responsibility. Each tried to shift blame as if avoiding their own fault would lighten everything. The neighbor sighed, recounting that the week before they argued so loudly the whole block knew. Maverick left after that fight and hasn't returned. I sat listening to it all, emotions tangled. A bit anxious, seeing their true nature gradually exposed exactly as I had witnessed. But mixed with it was a quiet sadness because, after all, they were once my family. Hearing those stories, I felt neither schadenfreude nor pity. I only quietly realized they had never changed. Just that when money flowed, greed was hidden, and when it dried up, their nature showed clearly. I sat at the dinner table telling Sarah, voice calm, "See, grandfather was right about everything." She held my hand. "Understanding that is enough. Let the rest stay behind." But in my heart, I knew the storm was returning. They would come to me when there was no way out. Anxiously waiting, I hugged Lucian tighter, determined to protect this peace. My life now was a dramatic novel, with the next chapter full of surprises. Time passed, and that peace lasted longer than I had imagined. The days with Sarah and Lucian felt like a gift from grandfather. Mornings waking to the sound of childish laughter. Afternoons strolling in the backyard where Lucian ran around with an old ball. And evenings gathered around the dinner table sharing trivial stories. I gradually learned to cherish every moment, no longer letting the past cling to me as before. My accounting work continued steadily, but now most of my time and attention went to my small family. I read books to Lucian every night, tended the flower pots on the balcony with Sarah, or simply sat by the window quietly watching him play. Lucian would often shout excitedly and run around the house. I'd laugh, chase after him, letting the laughter ring out naturally, and in those moments all worries seemed to vanish completely. But in a very deep corner of my heart, I still maintained the necessary vigilance, as if always prepared for things that could return at any time. The sporadic news about the old family, though rare, was enough to remind me that they were sinking deeper into the mess created by their own choices. One peaceful afternoon, I was playing with Lucian in the living room while Sarah prepared dinner in the kitchen. Outside, the autumn weather was mild, yellow leaves falling sporadically in front of the window. Inside was the familiar warmth and the faint aroma of roasting meat drifting from the kitchen. Lucian sat on the floor, focused on stacking wooden blocks into a small tower. I pretended to growl and crawled closer, making him shriek with laughter, clutching the blocks to his chest. "Wait, Dad. I'm almost done. Stay still, don't be the monster anymore." I was just bending down to lift him up when a decisive, unexpected knock sounded at the door. I froze. Lucian looked up toward the door too. The game stopped completely. The room suddenly went quiet for a moment, only the steady knocking echoing from outside. I frowned and checked the clock, 5 p.m., not delivery time or a friend's visit. Sarah called from the kitchen. "Honey, who's at the door?" I stood up, a bad premonition rising. "I don't know, let me check." My heart beat faster, anxious as if sensing the final storm had arrived. I opened the door and there they were. The entire extended family, Father Hudson, Mother Stella, Brother Maverick, Uncle Thomas, and a few cousins. They crowded on the porch, dressed neatly but faces clearly weary. Their full appearance surprised me. The first time in years they had come in such numbers. But I still maintained politeness, smiling faintly. "Mom, Dad, Maverick, Uncle, everyone's here unexpectedly. Please come in." They entered, filling my small living room. Father Hudson sat on the sofa. Mother Stella clutched her purse tightly as if afraid of losing it. Maverick leaned against the wall with a forced smile. Uncle Thomas and the cousins awkwardly looked around. The initial atmosphere carried a fake cordiality, like a hastily staged play. Mother Stella spoke first, voice trembling but trying to sound warm. "Andrew, my son, it's been so long since the family gathered. I've missed you so much." Father Hudson nodded and added, "That's right, we're family, blood ties. It's time to reconcile and put the past behind us." Maverick continued, voice unusually sweet. "Little brother, we played together since childhood. Remember fishing with grandfather? Don't let misunderstandings separate us anymore." Uncle Thomas and the cousins joined in, recalling old memories. "Exactly. Remember those New Year gatherings? It's time to reunite." Those appeals sounded nice, but I clearly sensed the falseness. Their evasive eyes, forced smiles. Anxiety surged. What do they want? Surely not just to reminisce. Amid the reconciliation talk, some hinted at help. One cousin said softly, "If Andrew is willing to reach out, the family will welcome you back as a true member." As if nothing ever happened. As if that acceptance was a privilege to be traded for what I already guessed. Uncle Thomas added, "That's right, our family would be stronger if everyone supported each other." Mother Stella wiped fake tears. "Son, I'm getting old. I just want my children to get along." I sat there listening, hands clenched under the table. Lucian ran in curiously, looking at the strangers, but Sarah quickly carried him to the kitchen, whispering, "I'll take him inside so you can talk." I nodded gratefully to her, heart full of tension. They were gradually leading to the real purpose, and I anxiously waited for the moment it became clear. Then a few began talking about their current hardships. Maverick started, voice complaining, trying to sound exhausted. "You know, little brother, I can't manage anymore. The real estate projects I pursued all collapsed. The market turned too fast. Debts piling up, creditors call every day. The financial pressure is suffocating me." Hudson jumped in right after, voice lowering as if drawing the story to himself. "Your parents aren't much better, son. Since everything fell apart, we've had to sell things off, scrimping on every expense. There were mistakes in the past. But who hasn't stumbled in life?" Thomas shook his head, sighing, continuing in a whining tone. "Uncle trusted people too much. Invested following Maverick's advice, thinking it was helping family. Who knew it would all be lost? Now there's nothing left. Those with means should know how to share, right, nephew?" Those hints were clearer than ever. No one said give money directly, but the intent was obvious. "You're rich now. Help us." one cousin added, voice gentle but testing. Our family has always shared everything, Andrew, helping us a bit now. What's the harm? The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. The initial cordiality vanished, replaced by blatant, expectant eyes. I felt my heart pounding, tension like standing in a play about to reach its climax. Did they think I was still the easily swayed Andrew from before? I listened in silence and quickly realized their attitude stemmed not from remorse or desire to repair. Not a single sincere apology. No words like, "We were wrong" or "We regret treating you badly." Just roundabout talk, recalling memories, appealing to emotions, and circling money. I remembered grandfather's letter. They approach for money, Andrew. Don't let them exploit you. Now everything was chillingly clear. Behind the reconciliation was the desire for financial help, to share the burden, to regain the circle of benefits they had lost. They hadn't come out of love, but because they were cornered, debts, failures, and now needing a wealthy brother to bail them out. Tension rose. In my mind, only one question: how to refuse without letting things spiral out of control. Keeping necessary calm, I took a deep breath and spoke, voice calm but resolute. I've heard everything. I appreciate everyone coming here, but I must say one thing clearly. Each person must bear responsibility for their own choices. I cannot, and do not want to, repeat the old cycle that hurt us all. Hudson frowned, voice heavy. What do you mean? You're not going to help the family? I continued slowly but clearly. I've set very clear boundaries. I refuse any disguised requests. I will not intervene, provide, or resolve consequences for others. Grandfather left it to me so I could live my own life, not to fix anyone else's mistakes. Maverick jumped up, voice harsh. Enough selfishness. We're blood. Will you really turn your back? Thomas muttered, full of discontent. You've changed, Andrew. Not the same as before. Stella burst into tears, voice trembling. How did my son turn out like this? But I didn't waver. I just shook my head, voice lowering. I'm sorry, but my answer is still no. Please leave. The extended family left in a heavy mood, mixed with disappointment, frustration, and unwillingness. Maverick glared at me one last time. You'll regret this. Hudson shook his head, voice cold. I have no son like you. The door closed, leaving a stifling atmosphere. Sarah came out from the kitchen, wrapping her arms around me, asking softly, Are you okay? I know this isn't easy, but you're not facing it alone. I nodded, but inside, full of vigilance. They wouldn't stop easily. And indeed. In the days that followed, they occasionally tried again. Sometimes Stella called crying, Son, just help Mom a little. I don't know who else to turn to. Sometimes Maverick texted, Just a temporary loan I promise to pay back as soon as I turn things around. Thomas even stopped by once, bringing an old photo as a gift, then quickly revealed his cards. Help Uncle pay this debt just once, for family ties. But the frequency gradually decreased as they realized my firmness wouldn't change. I only replied briefly, the same each time. No, I'm sorry, but I've made it very clear. I can't do that. No arguing. No long explanations. I understood that silence and clear boundaries were the strongest answer. I continued maintaining distance. No arguing, no explaining, no helping. I knew that if I yielded even once, even a small amount, all the boundaries I had built would collapse instantly, dragging in the hurts it had taken me years to escape. In the days following that extended family visit, I lived in a state of heightened alertness, like a soldier guarding a fortress. Every phone ring made my heart skip a beat. Every unknown message prompted careful scrutiny. Sarah noticed the tension. She often hugged me from behind, whispering, You didn't do anything wrong. You're just protecting what's yours. Everything will be okay. Lucian, now a bit older, ran around the house with carefree laughter, and his giggles were the medicine that kept me steady. I focused on my accounting work, on afternoons teaching Lucian to stack wooden blocks, on late evenings reading with Sarah. That peaceful life was the fruit of years of perseverance, and I wouldn't let anyone destroy it. But deep down, I knew they hadn't given up. They were just waiting for the right moment, and that moment would come when they were truly desperate. One day, while focused on work at the office, I unexpectedly received a call from Stella, my mother. She hadn't initiated contact in years, so the mere fact was enough to stun me. The familiar but distant number appeared on the screen, and I had to pause, staring for several seconds before deciding to answer. I took a deep breath and pressed accept. Her voice came through the line, broken and panicked, unlike previous times. "Andrew, Mom doesn't know what to do anymore." She burst into sobs, the choking sounds making me sit up straight, heart filled with anxiety. This wasn't the fake tone from before. This was real desperation. I tried to stay calm. "Mom, calm down. What happened?" In her halting voice, Stella recounted that Maverick had deceived our parents. He had convinced them to pour in their entire remaining savings, the little money left after previous failed investments, and mortgage their only house for a project he had dreamed up. "He said it was a golden opportunity, son," she said, voice trembling. "High profits, a quick turnaround. He promised everything, paying off old debts and giving your parents a comfortable life." I listened, gripping my pencil so tightly it snapped, picturing the scene. Maverick with his sly smile, painting pictures of a prime real estate project in Nevada promising fourfold returns. My parents, after years of losses, had blindly trusted their eldest son, the one they had always favored. I recalled Maverick boasting about business ideas and Father Hudson always nodding. My son is talented. Now everything had collapsed. She continued, voice growing weaker. "We believed him, Andrew. This was our last chance to recover after years of failure. We didn't doubt, didn't check anything, just placed full trust in Maverick." I sat in the quiet office, colleagues around unaware, but my mind spun. Maverick again. He had never changed. She went on. "Everything fell apart when the bank came to notify them of foreclosure and seizure of the house. They came to the house, son, with full paperwork. We panicked and called Maverick, but he had already spent all the investment money. Most of it went to partying, gambling, paying personal debts. He has no way to cover anything anymore. Now he's disappeared, phone off." I could imagine it. Parents standing in the house, foreclosure papers on the table, mother's cries mixing with father's angry shouts. The house, where I grew up with childhood memories mixed with pain, now lost completely. Maverick, ever the slick one, had fled, leaving the wreckage for our parents to bear. I asked softly, "How's Dad now?" And she sobbed louder. "Your father couldn't take the shock. He had a heart attack. He's in emergency now, critical condition." In panic and desperation, Stella had no one else to cling to and finally had to call me, the son she had once outright disowned. She said through tears, "I know I was wrong, son, but now there's only you." Her words cut into my heart like a knife. Though I had long severed emotional ties and set boundaries, I still couldn't completely ignore it. Inside me was a tug of war between memories of hurt, the scoldings, the disownment, the contemptuous looks, and the reality that the man on the hospital bed was still my father. I recalled the moment he disowned me over the phone, voice ice cold, and that pain remained raw. But he was still my father, the one who gave me life even if he had never truly understood me. I wondered, can I turn away? Or is this the final test? Anxious and conflicted, I ended the call after promising, "I'll come to the hospital to see." I left work early and drove to the hospital in Chicago, a several-hour journey, but my mind spun the whole way. Memories flooded back. Times father favored Maverick, overlooking me. Family gatherings where I sat alone, and rare moments when he hugged me as a child. He's still my father, I told myself, hands gripping the wheel tightly. By the time I arrived, it was dark. The hospital lights were cold and glaring. I entered the ICU, There lay Hudson, face gaunt, surrounded by beeping machines. He looked older than ever, skin ashen, eyes closed. In the hallway outside, Stella sat slumped, crying alone, hair disheveled. When she saw me, she jumped up, rushed over, and hugged me tightly, sobbing, "Andrew, you came. I know we were wrong. Please save your father. I don't know who else to turn to." Her words echoed, full of belated regret, but I didn't respond with reproach. Though the old pain remained like an unhealed scar, I still stepped in to cover all medical costs. I called Lawyer Jenkins, arranged transfers to the hospital, ensuring father received full treatment, the best doctors, a private room, necessary medications. "I'll cover Dad's medical bills," I told Mother, voice calm. She burst into tears, clutching my hand as if afraid I'd leave, voice trembling. "Thank you, son, even though I know we don't deserve you doing this." I didn't reply, just nodded, heart torn. Anxiously awaiting results, I sat by father's bed, watching his weak breathing, wondering, why does everything always reach this point? The doctor said the condition was critical, but timely intervention pulled him through. I stayed at the hospital a few hours, arranging everything, then returned home to Sarah and Lucian, heart heavy. In the weeks that followed, Hudson's health gradually stabilized. He regained consciousness, still weak but past the crisis. I visited occasionally, not often, just enough to stay informed. I covered essential needs like food, medications, even hiring temporary caregivers when necessary. Everything I did stayed at the necessary level. I maintained clear distance, no hugs, no prolonged conversations. It wasn't coldness, it was the boundary I had learned to set to protect myself. My parents began showing regret, for the first time admitting past mistakes. Father lying in the hospital bed, voice weak but clear. "Your mother and I favored Maverick too much, son. We misplaced our trust and overlooked you without realizing." Stella burst into tears, unable to hold them back. "I'm sorry for turning my back on you, for leaving you alone so long. I was wrong." Those words sounded sincere, but I quietly recognized a bitter truth. Regret only appeared when everything was lost. When the house was gone, money depleted, and they had no other way out. Compassion didn't mean returning to the old ways. I pitied them but didn't fully forgive. Anxious about the future, I wondered, have they truly changed? Or is it just temporary? I kept my distance, protecting my small family, knowing the real tragedy wasn't over yet. In the weeks after Father Hudson was hospitalized, I maintained my familiar routine. Waking early to brew coffee, dropping Lucian off at daycare, then diving into the piles of ledgers at the accounting office. Sarah was always by my side, encouraging me with warm hugs and whispers. "You're doing the right thing, but don't let them pull you back in." I nodded, but my heart was full of conflict. Each time I visited the hospital, I saw Father weaker, Mother Stella gaunt with red-rimmed eyes. They spoke of Maverick with voices full of disappointment. "He abandoned us, Andrew. We were wrong to trust him." Their words softened my heart, even though I knew it might just be surface level. I questioned it every night, lying beside Sarah, staring at the dark ceiling. Anxiously waiting, I felt like I was standing on the edge. One wrong step and everything could collapse. The day Hudson was discharged, I realized my parents had nowhere to go. They left the hospital, but their old house had been foreclosed, belongings sold off, and they had no friends or relatives willing to help. Mother Stella called me, voice trembling. "Son, we don't know where to go anymore." I sank into the sofa, phone pressed to my ear, heart torn. Memories flooded back. Times I was pushed aside, belittled, but also rare moments. Like when Father taught me to ride a bike as a child, or Mother made my favorite soup when I was sick. No matter how they treated me, they're still my parents, I told myself, though the old pain still stung. After much deliberation, considering Sarah's words, "You decide, I support you," I decided to take them in, considering it a final chance for everyone to heal. I said over the phone, "I'll bring you both to my home, but only temporarily, and you must respect the rules." She was overjoyed. "Thank you, Andrew. I promise we won't disturb your family. When I drove to the hospital to pick them up, my heart pounded with anxiety. Was this a mistake? Father Hudson in a wheelchair, Mother pushing from behind, both looking small and weary. On the drive home, the atmosphere was heavy silence, only the radio murmuring. Arriving home, Sarah and Lucian welcomed them sincerely, without reservation or resentment. Sarah hugged Mother Stella. "I'm Sarah, Andrew's wife. I've prepared a room for you two." I arranged a separate room for them, fully equipped. A comfortable double bed, wardrobe, even a small TV, ensuring all daily needs were met without shortage. I bought extra groceries, medications, and stated clearly, "You'll stay here to recover, but I have rules. No talking about money, no contacting Maverick without letting me know." They nodded vigorously without objection. The early days passed more warmly than I expected. Hudson's health improved noticeably. He started walking without crutches, his complexion rosier thanks to Sarah's prepared meals. He talked to me more, sometimes initiating trivial stories. "When I was young, I did accounting like you, but missed big opportunities." I listened, feeling lighter, though still keeping distance. Stella helped Sarah with cooking and cleaning. She washed dishes, folded laundry, and smiled joyfully watching Lucian run around. The family atmosphere gradually became familiar and close. Shared meals with laughter, afternoons when grandparents told fairy tales to the grandson. Lucian seemed thrilled having grandparents around, often playing, Grandfather Hudson teaching him to build shapes, Grandmother Stella singing lullabies. Watching that scene, my heart warmed. Maybe they've really changed. I began thinking my decision to open up this time was right, that the recent events, losing the house, the heart attack, desperation, were big enough to change my parents. Initial anxiety gave way to hope. Our family can heal. But that peace soon showed cracks. One day, Sarah told me in bed, voice low so no one heard, "Today I accidentally saw your mother meeting Maverick near the gate. She gave him something, looked like money, then hurried back inside when she spotted me from afar." I was surprised and confused, sitting up abruptly. "Are you sure it was them?" Sarah nodded. I saw clearly. Maverick was standing outside the gate, looking sneaky. My heart pounded harder, anxiety surging. Maverick, the one who vanished after scamming them. Why appear? And why hide it from me? I recalled their promise. No contacting him. Doubt arose, but I didn't confront immediately. Just observed. From then on, my parents began constantly approaching me with various unexpected expenses. Sometimes additional medical bills, other times medications, health supplements. Then old debts resurfaced with urgent reasons. At first, the requests were sporadic, but gradually became more frequent, from occasional to weekly, as if it had become a hard-to-break habit. I still agreed to help, transferring money via accounts, but doubt grew inside. The requests no longer seemed necessary or reasonable as before. Medical bills already covered, medications excessive, old debts vague. I wondered, what are they using the money for? For Maverick? Anxiously waiting, I began discreetly monitoring, checking bills, observing behavior. The home atmosphere remained outwardly warm, but I felt like walking a tightrope. One misstep, everything collapses. One day I finished work early and returned home unannounced. A new habit for checking. The house was quiet, no sign of parents in the living room. Thinking they were resting, I headed toward their bedroom. Light footsteps on the wooden floor, but as I neared the door, I froze, hearing whispers. Father Hudson's voice. "We need to find a way to get more money from Andrew. Maverick is pressing too hard." Mother Stella replied, "Yes, last time we gave him $500, but he said it wasn't enough to pay debts. What excuse now?" The words were fragmented, but enough for me to understand. They needed more money from me to give Maverick for debts, and were devising more ways because he kept pressuring. I stood frozen outside the door, blood rushing to my face. So all the previous requests weren't for essentials, but to continue enabling Maverick, the scammer who abandoned them. They still favored him, even after he nearly killed Father, even after losing everything. In that moment, I understood my parents had never truly awakened. Despite losing nearly everything, despite facing the brink between life and death, they unconsciously repeated old choices. All the boundaries I tried to build were erased just for one name, Maverick. They continued putting him above truth, above responsibility, even above the trust I had tried to rebuild. And right then I realized the problem had never been money or events, but deeply ingrained choices not easily changed by loss alone. My heart seemed to stop for a second, then blood rushed to my head, burning hot. I was no longer the quiet, enduring Andrew of the past, the one who always tolerated and hoped. In that moment, standing outside the bedroom door, hearing those whispers, everything shattered. Maverick, the deceiver, the abandoner, was still their center, even after he nearly killed Father, even after they lost their home and everything. I felt a surging anger, but not blind rage. It was final clarity, like a beam of light piercing dark clouds. Anxiety rose. What will I do now? Let them stay or end it all? But the answer was clear. I took a deep breath, clenched my fists, and pushed the door open hard, stepping inside. My parents' faces went pale when they realized I had been there and heard everything. Father Hudson sat on the bed, holding his phone, probably texting Maverick, his face ashen, stammering, "Andrew, why are you home early today?" Mother Stella stood up, hand over her mouth, eyes wide in panic. "Son, it's not what you think. We were just—" But her words choked off when she saw my eyes. The air in the room suddenly grew heavy, like a bomb about to explode. I stood there in the room I had arranged for them with so much hope, now only witnessing the final betrayal. Memories flooded back. Times I was sidelined for Maverick, the mockery at the will reading, and the recent warm weeks, all now a bitter joke. Anxiety turned to resolve. I thought, enough. It can't continue. I didn't explain, didn't question, didn't let emotions lead. Calm but resolute, I demanded they pack their things and leave immediately. My voice was cold, without tremor. "Pack up. I'll call a taxi to take you to a motel. Right now." Father Hudson jumped up, face flushed red. "You dare kick us out? After everything you've done?" Mother Stella burst into tears, kneeling to grasp my hand. "Son, please don't. We just wanted to help Maverick. He's your brother." I shook my head, slowly pulling my hand from her grip. I said, voice low but firm, "There are no more chances. I gave you the final one, and you betrayed it." Realizing everything was fully exposed, my parents panicked. Mother Stella collapsed into the chair, sobbing, "I beg you, I promise for real. We'll cut off Maverick. I won't contact him anymore. Give me one more chance. I'll do it right this time." She clutched my sleeve, tears falling endlessly, eyes full of fear. "Your parents have no one else to rely on but you." Father Hudson quickly added, voice hoarse, pleading yet desperate. "I know I was wrong, Andrew. I admit everything. But you can't throw your parents out like this. We're still family." Those words came rapidly, full of desperation, but this time they no longer touched me. I had heard too many such promises. In the hospital, during money requests, in moments they needed me most, and every time things returned to the old ways. The initial anxiety vanished, replaced by clear coldness. I knew one thing for sure. They wouldn't change, and if I didn't end this now, the cycle would never stop. I stood straight, voice slow but leaving no room for negotiation. "I'll say it once more, pack and leave today." Mother Stella sobbed louder, shaking her head. "No, you can't. I beg you." I looked straight at her, saying each word clearly. "If you don't leave now, I'll call the police." The room went silent. I continued, voice even, not loud, but enough for them to know I wasn't bluffing. "I don't want it to go that far, but I will if necessary. You have 30 minutes. My words cut off their last hope like a knife. Father Hudson muttered curses in fury, but then turned to pack. Mother Stella cried throughout, hands trembling as she stuffed clothes into bags, the items I had bought for them when I still thought things could be different. They left the house unsteadily in silence. No goodbye, no final plea. As the door closed, I knew I had completely ended a cycle of hurt that had lasted years. I stood watching through the window as the taxi carried them away. My heart was heavy but also lighter than ever. No more vague hopes, no more tearing, only peace, the peace I had to create for myself with my own hands. And for the first time in a long while, I knew for certain, finally I was free. That evening, after Lucian was asleep, I sat down for an honest talk with Sarah. We sat at the kitchen table under the warm yellow light, holding hot teacups. I told her everything, from the eavesdropping to deciding to kick them out. Sarah listened, eyes glistening. I trust your decision, but now we need to plan long term. I took a deep breath. We have to leave this place. Not running away, but protecting our small family. They'll come back, Sarah, and I don't want Lucian growing up in that shadow. She nodded, holding my hand. I agree. Anywhere, as long as it's with you and our son. We decided together. Sell the house, move far away. Not impulsively, but proactively. Anxious about the new future, I thought, this is the new chapter, without the past's shadow. I quickly sold the house and moved the family to Oregon, choosing a quiet coastal town, Astoria, with its small cobblestone streets, salty sea breeze, and rhythmic waves. Far enough to cut all ties with the old family, no phone numbers, no address, no social media. I sold the house through the lawyer, transferred money to safe funds, and we started anew in a seaside wooden house with a backyard overlooking the ocean. The move was long but not burdensome. Lucian was excited about his first flight, eyes wide at everything around. Sarah tiredly leaned on my shoulder, holding our sleeping son. When we set foot in the new home, fresh air rushed in like a wind, washing away lingering fatigue. I soon found an accounting job at a small coastal finance firm. Not glamorous, no fierce competition, just enough to work with my abilities and live an active, tranquil life. The days that followed passed slowly and lightly. No pressure, no toxic ties. Every morning we walked the beach as a family. Lucian bent down to pick small seashells, while Sarah planted wildflowers by the porch. No late-night calls, no calculating eyes or hidden demands. The initial anxiety about the new place gradually faded, replaced by simple joy, the peace I once thought I'd never have. Sarah gradually regained the security she had lost. She opened a small bookstore in town where regulars came not just for books but to chat and share everyday stories. I saw her glowing more each day, serene in her own way. Lucian grew up in a stable, warm environment. He attended the local school, quickly making friends with neighborhood kids. His laughter filled the house, clear and carefree. Every afternoon we went to the beach together, watching him build sandcastles enthusiastically, then destroy them with peals of laughter. In those moments I realized what I cherished most was that laughter, unburdened by the past, unshadowed by old hurts. Occasionally I still heard scattered bits about the old family through acquaintances. A call checking on an aunt, fragmented stories about Maverick, about my parents. But I no longer let them occupy my thoughts. I quietly ended the conversations, wishing them well in my mind, then hung up. I turned to Lucian, bending to his eye level, smiling. Now tell Dad what you learned today. And in that moment I knew I was truly where I belonged. On a trip with wife and son, we drove along the Oregon coast, stopping in small towns, eating fresh seafood and watching sunsets. Watching Lucian excitedly talk non-stop about a starfish he found, I suddenly recalled the entire journey. From being belittled at the will reading, betrayed by family, to learning to set boundaries and choose peace. Tears streamed down, but tears of happiness. The anxiety ended, leaving only peace. Looking back at everything now, I understand that family only truly matters when built on respect and sincerity. Blood ties aren't a free pass for hurt, nor do they give anyone the right to exploit or impose in the name of kinship. True love doesn't force people to shrink, live in fear or guilt. It allows each to be themselves without trading for pain. From my own story, I drew a bitter but necessary lesson. Unconditional sacrifice isn't always noble. Without boundaries, endurance easily becomes soil nurturing wrong behaviors, repeating the cycle of hurt from generation to generation. Only by daring to say enough could I truly end what had silently eroded me for years. And if I have advice for anyone stuck in similar relationships, if a relationship only exists when you give, endure, and make yourself smaller, have the courage to leave it. Choosing peace isn't selfish, it's responsibility for your own life and for those you truly love. I chose peace, and it was the best decision I ever made.